Hey guys, in this video the brilliant Mr. B is going to be working out some questions based on parallel angle facts. Now this is a really important skill because it can get quite complicated. There are 15 different questions at 3 different levels, and if you want to jump between the levels, the pinned comment down below will be the one to help you go to the right place. If you want more examples after this, then there are thousands of questions waiting for you over on my website.
Have a look at angle facts in parallel lines. Now, before we look at parallel lines, there's 2 concepts that we need to know, and these concepts are being adjacent and being opposite. So we look at question 1 and we look at the 2 angles. We've got 115 degrees, which I'm colouring in blue, and we've got the x, the missing number, which I'm colouring in green. Now, those 2 angles are next to each other, so we're saying that those 2 angles are adjacent. Now, the maths with this, and then if you've seen the angle facts video, you'll notice these 2 are on a straight line. They're making a semicircle, so they have to add together to make 180. So when we have 2 angles next to each other, they are adjacent, then what we mean is that they add to 180. So the maths we do here is that we've got 115 degrees, and this is the clue that we've been given in the question. The total that this is going to make is 180 degrees. So we have to take away the 150 degrees from the 180, and whatever's left over will be the missing angle. Now we've usually got to borrow 1 to do the calculation. So 10 take away 5, 7 take away 1, and 1 take away 1 gives us 65. So our missing angle x is equal to 65 degrees. So this is the method used to work out adjacent angles that are on a straight line. So, looking at question 2 and 3, these are also examples of adjacent angles on a straight line, and what's happening if the rotation is different. And no matter what rotation you have, as long as they are on a straight line, then they're going to add up to 180. So, looking at question 2, we have 36 degrees. We know that the total is 180 degrees. So we take away 36 from 180, and whatever is left over is our missing angle. Now again, we're going to have to borrow. So 10 take away 6, 7 take away 3, and 1 take away 0. So our missing angle x is equal to 144 degrees. Do the same thing with question 3. Identify what we've got. We've got a 59 degrees. We know the total is going to be 180 degrees. So I'm going to take away the 59. We're going to have to borrow 1. So we have 10 take away 9, 7 take away 5, and 1 take away 0. So our missing angle x is equal to 121 degrees. So that is all about adjacent angles on straight lines. Now the next thing we need to look at are opposite angles. So we can see on question 3, we've got the 120 degrees, which I'm colouring in blue, and we've got the x degrees, which I'm colouring in green, and you should be able to see they look pretty much the same size. And if you're going to do an experiment on this on your own, and you're going to draw 2 lines that intersect, that cross over, and you measure the 2 angles that are opposite, you should always find that they are exactly the same size. So opposite angles are equal to each other. Now this leads to some really easy questions, because if opposite angles are equal to each other, then x is going to be equal to 120 degrees. And I don't need to do any working out at all. And then question 5 is the same. Opposite the 77 is the missing angle, x. So x must be the same size as 77. X is 77 degrees. So look how fast those questions are. There's absolutely no working out. So the big thing to remember is that adjacent angles on a straight line add up to 180 degrees. Opposite angles, and these are at a point, are equal. So these are 2 very important concepts to understand for moving on to the medium and hard questions. Now moving on to the medium questions, and there are a few more concepts we need to learn. Now the first thing is all of these diagrams have got parallel lines, and to show this we need to have a little arrow on each of the parallel lines to show that they are actually parallel. So the 2 are marked in blue are parallel to each other. The two that are marking in green are parallel to each other. If they didn't have these markings, you don't know for sure that they're parallel, even if they look parallel. So you wouldn't be able to use the rules we're about to learn. Doesn't matter which way around the arrow faces, as long as both facing the same way. So there are three different rules that we're going to learn with parallel lines. Now, the first rule we're going to learn is about question 1, and we can see that the two angles, we've got a 47 degrees, which I'm colouring in blue. We've got an X, which I'm also colouring in blue, and you should be able to see that those two angles look like they're the same size. And they are. And we call these corresponding angles. Now, that's quite a bit of a mouthful to say, so there's an easy way to remember this, and the easy way to remember it is to say that these are F angles. And you'll see that the question above, question 1, roughly resembles an F shape. So this is where the kind of F angles comes from. Now, a really important thing to note here is that whenever you're asked to use F angles or corresponding angles on an exam, you actually get marks for saying the word corresponding. So if you say F angles on the exam paper, you are going to lose a mark. But it is a good way to remember how it works. Now, what actually is the thing here? Well, the two angles in the F, underneath the kind of caps of the F, which I'm just labelling here, they are equal. So corresponding angles, they are equal. So when we look at question 1, we've got the 47 and the X, we can say that X is equal to 47 degrees because they are corresponding angles. On an exam, we get 1 mark for saying 47 degrees. It would get 1 mark for saying corresponding angles are equal. If you said F angles are equal, you wouldn't get that mark. But again, that F shape is a good way to remember where the two angles are that are equal to each other. So moving on to question 2, it's kind of, you might think, well, what letter does that make? It's an upside down F shape. Now, if you rotate your screen to kind of, or maybe you rotate your head, you should be able to see that's an upside down F shape. And when we're saying things like corresponding angles and we're using the F shape to help us remember it, it doesn't matter about the rotation. So since it's an upside down F shape, we can say that X is equal to 131 degrees. And it's equal to 131 because the two angles I'm highlighting in green, the X and the 131, they are corresponding angles. Now, moving on to question 3, and we can see this doesn't make an F shape at all. So we've got our X, we've got 129. Now, these are called alternate angles. Now, there is a letter shape to help you remember these as well, and it's the Z shape. Now, again, on an exam paper, do not at any point say that this is a Z shape, because you will not get the marks for it. If you use the word alternate angles, you will get the marks. Now, what does it mean? Well, the two angles I'm labelling now, those two angles are equal. So when we look at question 3, we can see it's kind of a backward Z shape. So the two angles are labelled are both 129 degrees. And it's because they are alternate angles. And question 4 is the same thing. The 49 and the X are in a Z shape together, so they're going to be the same size. So we say that X is equal to 49 degrees, and that's worth 1 mark. And then we say because they are alternate angles, and alternate angles are equal, for your second mark. Again, if you just say Z angles, you're not getting that second mark, so use the correct terminology. But again, the Z shape is a really good way to remember what you're looking at. Moving on to question 5, now we've got 48 degrees, which I'm colouring in pink, and we've got X degrees, which I'm also colouring in pink. And we've got to think, right, what letter can we see with these? And if you look carefully, it's not an F shape and it's not a Z shape. So what do we do? Well, this is the third type, and this is called co-interior angles. And co-interior angles, they make a C shape. Now, you might think to yourself here, right, okay, so these are equal as well. So X is 48, and this is a really unbelievably easy topic. Well, unfortunately, that's not the case. So if you look at the little C, the two angles I'm labelling, they are not equal, they are different. If you look at the diagram, you should be able to see that X is a bit bigger than the 48. Now, the thing here is co-interior angles have a total of 180 degrees. So the same thing as adjacent angles, or you could say angles on a straight line. Even though the two angles are not adjacent to each other, they're not next to each other, they're not touching each other, And they are in a straight line together, but they're not right next to each other on the same point. So what we've got to do is we're going to say, well, our total is 180 degrees. We've got 48 degrees. So we need to take them away from each other to find the missing angle. So it works the same way as finding missing angles in triangles or in straight lines or any of the things that we've covered. We're going to have to borrow 1 to start. So this should be looking very, very familiar. So 10 take away 8, 7 take away 4, and 1 take away 0. X is equal to 132 degrees. So we have to remember corresponding angles, alternate angles, and co-interior angles. You have to remember the official terminology because you get 1 mark, and exam papers almost always say, why is this the angle? And you have to explain why by using these words and these definitions. But the F, Z, and C are nice ways to remember how they all work. So moving on to the hard questions, what I've got at the bottom of the page is a key of what we learned so far. And I've added to the corresponding alternate and co-interior angles for the medium questions, the opposite angles from the easy questions. A little extra thing here, we use a letter to remember opposite angles as well. Opposite angles make an X shape, and opposite angles are equal as well. Again, one last time, it's really important. Don't always think that all these angles are always equal, and it's really easy, because firstly, we have the co-interior angles, which total 180, and then we're going to look at the hard questions, where we have to use a mix of more than one of these, and not all of these answers are going to be equal. So, looking at question 1, now there's more than one way to tackle this question. So what I'm going to do is, I've got the 88 degrees, and the first thing to look out for are opposite angles. And I can see, if I highlight the 2 lines that make up the angle for 88 degrees, if I continue those lines on, I can see that I'm making an X shape. So these are opposite angles. So I know that the angle underneath is also 88 degrees. Now, moving on further, what else can I do with this 88 degrees? Well, another thing is that you might be able to see that there's a co-interior angle. Again, if you highlight the 2 angles that make up the 88 degrees there, and I'm going to continue this line on, and I come to the bottom, I've made a backwards C shape. So these 2 angles add up to 180 degrees. So we've got 180, we've got 88. So I need to do a subtraction to work out what the missing part is. So I've got to borrow 1, 10 take away 8. 7 take away 8, we're borrowing again. 17 take away 8, and 0 take away 0. So we've got 92 degrees. So now the angle at the bottom is 92 degrees. Now I've worked that out, you should be able to see the 92 is opposite the X we're looking for. So I'm going to highlight the 2 lines that make up the X we're looking for. I'm going to highlight the 2 lines that make up the 92 degrees. And we can see that they are making an X shape. So X would be 92 degrees. Now, on an exam paper, that might be worth, let's say, 2 marks. 1 mark for using the opposite angle fact, and 1 mark for using co-interior angles. Now, that would be a 3 or 4 mark question, and the rest of the marks would be for using the definitions. So anytime I've written a number in green, we have to write an exam paper because opposite angles are equal. And every time I've written a number in pink, you'd have to write because co-interior angles add up to 180 degrees. And then you'll get the full marks. So again, it's very, very important that along with these numbers, you also use the correct terminology and you're learning the 4 facts I've written at the bottom of the page. Moving on to question 2, I've got the 50 degrees, and again, the first thing to do is always look for opposite angles because they're probably the easiest to use. So I'm highlighting the 2 sides that make up the 50 degrees. I can continue those lines onwards, and we are going to make an X shape. So I know that the angle at the opposite side is also 50 degrees. And feel free to do this on your exam paper as well and highlight the letters on there. That's going to help you. Now I've done that, I could do various things. I could use co-interior angles again and work out the angle below, and that'll be absolutely fine. But I'm going to try use a few different techniques, and there are multiple ways to answer these questions. Now, another way is we could use corresponding angles. You might be able to see that the 50 and the X are in an F shape with each other. So we're going to highlight for the 2 sides that make up the X. I'm going to highlight the 50, the 2 sides that make up the 50. If I join those lines up, might be able to see we're making an F shape. So the X at the bottom is equal to 50 degrees. Now again, all those numbers are the same. And you could guess on your exam paper and just say, well, okay, they'll all be 50. And you've got a 50% chance of getting a few marks for that. But the important thing here is that you're using the correct terminology. So when I've used the green 50 at the top, you've got to say because opposite angles are equal and label that. And then when I use the blue 50 at the bottom, you've got to say because corresponding angles are equal and label that. So the examiner can follow the working that you're doing. Moving on to question 3. Now again, with 104 degrees, we do have an opposite angle we can use right at the start. And again, this is always the easiest way to start. So we know we've got 104 on the opposite side. What we want to do now is get from the 104 down to the x at the bottom. Now, yeah, we could find cointerior angles and find the angle underneath. That would be a valid thing to do. But again, it should be able to see. And if you can't see it, that's fine. Just highlight the number you're looking for, the x. Highlight the nearest clue, which is the 104. And see what letter starts to form. And if the lines don't join up, extend them and join them up. And we can see that we've got a backwards F shape. So x is going to be equal to 104 degrees. It's not because it's an F shape, we can't say that on the exam paper, although it's a good way to remember how this works. You have to say it's 104 because corresponding angles are equal. So whenever you see the blue, you've got to say corresponding angles are equal. Whenever you see the green, which I've got at the top, you've got to say opposite angles are equal. Moving on to question 4. So again, always start with your opposite angles. So you can see that I've got 42 degrees. That's opposite. And now, maybe I could use corresponding angles here and get the answer straight away. I want to show you there's more than one method. And maybe you forgot about corresponding angles and you can't remember that word. Yeah, you can still get full marks. So I've not used alternate angles yet. So if I highlight the 42 I've just drawn out, and I make that into a Z shape, which would look like this, then I know that the angle at the top of the Z is also going to be 42 degrees because alternate angles are equal. So I've got a 42 a little bit closer to the X. And now I can see that that 42 is in an X shape. It's opposite angles with the answer that I'm looking for. So X is 42 degrees. Now, again, with that question, it's exactly the same as question 2 and 3. So we could have done opposite angles, we could have done corresponding angles, we could have had the answer after 2 steps. But with this question, I've got the answer after 3 steps, but I've used opposite angles, corresponding angles, and then opposite angles again. So there's always multiple ways to get your answer, and this is especially useful if you do forget one of the words. You can always use other techniques to get the same answer. Now looking at question 5, so again, always start off with identifying any opposite angles you can find, and we've got one, so let's label that 32. And then I want to get closer to the X, and I don't think any of the letters will get me onto that X straight away. So I'm not going to be too worried about exactly what I'm going to find. I'm just going to find anything that I can that's a little bit closer. I'm going to highlight 32 degrees, and I think that's going to make a backwards Z shape, and it'll give me a 32 that's a little bit closer to the X. Now, that 32 is adjacent to X. It's on a straight line with the X. And I'm just going to highlight a straight line. So you might be able to see, just draw over the top in a different shade, that 32 is on a straight line with the X. So we know about angles and straight lines. The total is going to be 180 degrees. One of the angles is 32, so the other angle is whatever's left over if I take away from 180. I'm going to have to borrow to start, so 10 take away 2, 7 take away 3, and 1 take away 0. So X is going to be 148 degrees. Now, what I want to kind of point out here now is that we've drawn on something else. We've drawn angles on a straight line, and we mentioned it in the easy questions as adjacent angles, and that's fine. And what's going to start happening is you'll get some of these parallel angle facts, and you'll get other angle facts. You might have a triangle involved in these questions. You might have a quadrilateral. You might have other things as well. So always be prepared for other topics creeping in that are about angles. So with question 5, we've got opposite angles are equal for the green 32. We've got alternate angles are equal for the purple 32. And then for the final answer, we have to say that angles on a straight line add up to 180 degrees. So we've used 3 different facts, one of which is from a different topic to get to our answer. And that's totally normal for a question like this. The last thing that's really important to point out is that the majority of these parallel angle facts about angles being equal to each other, 3 of the 4 angles are equal to each other. Now, if you have a look at the answers, Question 2, 3 and 4, the answer is just the same number again. It's really, really easy. But it's really important to note that question 1 and question 5, the answer is not the same as the question. In fact, we've taken away from 180. So don't always assume, just because it's parallel angle facts, it's always going to be the same number repeated and they're the easiest questions on the exam paper. So yeah, fairly easy. Just always keep in mind that sometimes you do need to take away from 180. You should be working through it step by step properly, not guessing, and then also using the appropriate terminology, because using the official words, opposite, corresponding, alternate and co-interior, are going to get you double marks for these questions. You're going to get you explanation marks.
Ouch! This is why in some videos I have unexplained scratches.